The Alter Rebbe is talking about Kamaya Param Laponim Chin Levad Malad. So the Vaila, we had one point at Kamaya Param Laponim, and the point is Hashem favors us. He gave us Teiro mitzvahs. Hasheket the Shalom mitzvahs of Tzivanu. We don't deserve it at all. It's a completely Malmailo Lamata de Kamatona Azevite, and he connected it to Yitzias Mitzrayim. Memchas and Memtes is more on the sugya of Kamaya Param Laponim, but it's a different Nakud. And the Nakuda is Hashem kvetches himself. For us, we should kvetch ourselves for him. Hashem makes tzimtzumim atzumim, so that we should be able to exist. We should kvetch ourselves for him. This is the Nakuda of the next two prakim. And this is the only two, I think, in all of the Tanya, the two prakim that are the most haskaladik, the most not avoided, are Memches and Tes. But she talks about the Shtashlis and Edin Sof and tzimtzumim. So let's begin. Again, we're going to talk about another point in the the idea of what he calls in Perek Memtes a love that presses the flesh, crushes the flesh. The Eibishter crushes himself. Tzimtzum, we should crush ourselves. Iskafia. Somehow our Iskafia hurts more than his Tzimtzum, but that's another story. The person begins by thinking, meditating on the Gedulas and Baruch of the greatness of Ein Sof. That in fact the Eid Ein Sof is exactly as the word denotes. Ein Sof without an end, Ein Ketz and beyond an edge, V'tachlis. It doesn't even have a purpose, klal whatsoever. In other words, you cannot say why Eid Ein Sof exists. It's an Amiti, it exists just because it exists. Eid V'chayis, to the light and life, which is, by the way, Mamalak Lam, Sevach Lam, Mamalak Lam. Hamispashet, many years Baruch, which radiates, emanates from him, Kvayach. B'ritania Pasha, based on his simple will. You learn it in Samach Vav, or you learned it last year in Samach Vav. That the Eid Ein Sof, which is Nimshach Famar, cannot be called a Gilui Beratzen. It's called a Gilui Ritzainis. The difference between a Gilui Beratzen and Gilui Ritzainis means Gilui Beratzen means it once wasn't and now it is. Gilui Ritzainis means it always was. It mean amoy, but it's not behechelech, but like by the sun. The sun must produce light. By the Eibishter, it's Beratzen. B'ritania Pasha, but the infinite will, the plain will of Atmas Ein Sof. That is, it's unified in the essence of the Rebbe, in the ultimate level of Achdus. So the Alter Rebbe says, I want to introduce you to Mr. Ein Sof. The first thing you have to remember, we're not talking about the Rebbe, we're talking about the Ein Sof. Hashem is not the Ein Sof, the Rebbe is Ein Tchila. And Hashem is not defined by his grandness and his infinity. The Rebbe is defined by what we call his Yeshus, his self-identity, that I exist to myself. The Eid is called Ayin, and the Eibush is called Yesh. So the subject we're going to be discussing, which is the idea of Tzimtzum, and that, so to speak, we owe the Eibush to a debt of gratitude. Since he was Ava, the Chakas Abbas, he squeezed himself in Tzimtzum issue, we should squeeze ourselves. And remember that he's making it clear that Tzimtzum is an Oid and not an Moed. You see what I'm trying to tell you? By beginning the discussion on Tzimtzum with the Inyan of Eid Ein Sof, the Alter Rebbe is indicating that the whole Inyan of Tzimtzum, which will follow now, is addressing only Eid Ein Sof and not Moed. There's no Tzimtzum and Moed. It's a very sadistic sheet of the Alter Rebbe. Hamoidu b'izgaros. You understand what I'm saying? We're going to be learning now about Eid Ein Sof to bring out the Tzimtzum of Eid Ein Sof. But point number one is that it's only in the Eid that there's the Tzimtzum and not in the Moed. Now, if there would be a Shtashos Elam, the chain reaction of worlds, in the levels of the infinite light of the Eibishter, believe Tzimtzumim without major contractions, through the order of the steps, from step to step, using the pattern of cause and effect. Now this is a very, very weird sugya, but what the Alter Rebbe is saying here, that there's the inyan of Ilav Yol and Oyer. Usually Ilav Yol is in Shefa. In Seichel you have Seichel Arav, and Seichel Atalmud is Ilav Yol. In Seichel you have Seichel and Midas, that's Ilav Yol. Here we're saying in Eid Ein Sof there's a higher Madrega of Eid Ein Sof and a lower Madrega of Eid Ein Sof, and it's also even Ilav, which is hard to understand because Eid Ein Sof doesn't operate Ilav Olo. Eid Ein Sof is Eid Mein HaMoed, but you have it in Samach Vav. You should know. The Alter Rebbe shall be Samach Vav, a mind from the Alter Rebbe, where he explains the Inyan of Ilav Yol, Gili and Helam and Eid Ein Sof. But when you have Ilav Yol and Eid Ein Sof, there's an enormous kiruv, enormous closeness between the Ol and the Ilav. The lower Madrega of Eid is also Eid Ein Sof, and therefore this world, the physical world, which requires fundamental containment to the Eibishter, could not be created whatsoever. As we see it and experience it now, that it has an end, and it exists for a specific purpose. That, and Alter Rebbe brings Lashon Gemara to denote the Hagabala of Elam Hazah. That between the earth and the first heaven is 500 years of walking, and then between each heaven there's again a hilach of 500 years. And then the space of each rakia itself Hilach Takshana, you should understand that this whole business of Hilach Takshana is Ruchnius. And it's not the same 500 years. It's not like if Hilach Takshana, let's say the Gagal Ayareach is 1,000,000 miles, it doesn't mean the Hilach Takshana, the Gagal of another planet, will also be 1,000,000 miles. It could be 5,000,000 miles. Because in each world, the Hilach Takshana is the Fi and Yoni. The bottom line is, by indicating that there's a certain amount of measurable amas, or distance, whether it's Gashmizik distance or Ruchnizik distance, that defines Elam Hazard, the bottom line is, as large as it is, it's Midad Madad Mugdal. It's B'mdida Bagbal. And he continues, which are Ruchnizik worlds, are all part of Elam Hazeh. But he said 4 lines about Elam Hazeh, it includes Vaistuis Biyah, which is Mad and Neshamas Tzadikim Magadelim, the home of the souls of the highest tzaddikim. Now I want you to know that the highest tzaddikim live in Atzilus, but here it says Elam Haba Gan Eden Elyon, which is Cheder Bria, V'tzadachim, V'anesham V'tzatzma, and ordinary souls which exist in Bria. V'ein tzarach leim HaMalachim, and certainly Malachim which exist in Yetzirah. So you should know Hein B'Bchinas Vul V'Tachlis. The spiritual worlds are also limited and with a specific purpose. Because the definition of those creations is that their identity is their hasaga, their ability to understand the Eibishter, and there's a gold hasagas, and say Baruch on the infinite light of the Eibishter, which is radiating down upon them, according to the principle of Eidin Sof coming into Chabad. In other words, like this: what's going on in Gan Eden? The short answer is hasaga lekis. You have to eat chicken soup and play ball and deal with politics. Neshamas in Gan Eden, their whole reality, Neshamas, before they came into this world, have only Hasaga and Elikus. After they return to this world, after having lived here and collected Torah and mitzvahs, their avodah is to have Hasaga and Elikus. And there's a whole thing in Chassidus based on Kisvei Rizal. Me'ayin baso la'on atahilach. We started out in ayin and going back to on. In some places it says me'ayin baso, came from Gan Eden Elyon. La'on atahilach, going back to Gan Eden Tacht. Don't forget, you're coming from Gan Eden Adachna, but the difference is really not so much which Gan Eden you're going into, but now there's something called Tainug HaSaga. Before the Neshama is here, there's only Hasaga, not this Tainug HaSaga. Tainug HaSaga is the experience of Eidin Sof, and that's why you come down Lamata to have this Tainug. But since it's not pure Tainug, it's Tainug HaSaga, it's the pleasure from understanding Getlachkeit, it's called Tainug HaMorkev, and it's B'mdida Vagbal. So Elam Hazeh is limited. The Elam of Tzadikim Gedalim is limited. The Elam of Neshama Stama limited. The Elam of Malachim is limited, because we're all creations that are defined not by our bittul atmi to the Eibishter, but by our Hasag. As a consequence, there's a limit to their ability to have pleasure. That those they're having pleasure from the ray of the Shechina. They're getting pleasure from the Eid Ein Sof. Nevertheless, it's called Einig HaMorkev. It's not pure Eidin Sof. Eidin Sof is grafted and riding on their Hasaga, and their Hasaga qualifies and limits, and the right word is it reveals, and every revelation is a diminution. The Eidin Sof as it experiences is a experience. There's no way they can receive pleasure and delight in the Ein Sof by itself. They should lose their form and return to their source. So, if there would be a Gili of Eidin Sof, even if there would be Elam of Eidin Sof, even if there would be a Shtatus of Eidin Sof, but there couldn't be an Atzilus, there couldn't be a Bria, there couldn't be a Tzir, there for sure couldn't be an Elam. And that's why you have to have real tzimtzum. And again, the message is going to be, very good.